Salawete Miyamiki. A lot of you seemed to like the lore video, I guess, if you want to call it that, from last time. So I'm bringing back out this sketchbook, well, sketchbook. It's really just a notepad with a Sharpie. I did draw a little something, just for funsies, but that was with pencil. Usually I prefer pen or marker because it's permanent. Anyways, for today's topic, it's one that I find pretty interesting. It is a discussion that many folks have at some point in their life with someone else. I feel like it's a very popular conversation to have, but just the different versions of being alone. This may sound sad, but really it's just a dive into the multifaceted nature of um, a state of being. Anyways, we'll just dive right in. I have a couple little illustrations right here. Kind of neutral, happy-ish, more so neutral, and then not so happy. It's not going to be too in depth. I'm by no means an expert in any of these things, but this is just based on what I've observed and, different things that I've looked up and figured out on my own. The most applicable three terms are going to be feeling lonely, being alone, and being independent. These are not the same term, although they are used interchangeably sometimes by others in various media. Because you can be a couple of these, but not all of them at once. You could be just one, or even all three. Kind of, anyway. So in this first illustration, I have this guy right here. I have illustrated a bunch of people surrounding him. You can be surrounded when you're feeling lonely, but you'll still feel a sense of isolation. You may be isolated by your own doing, or you may still want others around, but either way you feel lonely. Being lonely is a feeling. You can feel it no matter how many people are around you. Being alone, on the other hand, is the actual state of having no one around you, no one physically in your presence. Even if you want others around, that doesn't necessarily mean you want to change the circumstances around you. And then this last one. Okay, well, unfortunately, I've picked an unfortunate time to record. I think my neighbors are either moving furniture, banging each other, or playing with their pet dog. Either way, it's very creaky and it's kind of annoying. Anyways, this last one is just independence, not needing others to be around in order to feel a sense of fulfillment. These are the three main terms that stem around this conversation and really show how much of a spectrum it is. It's not just you are this or this. You can be varying levels of any of these, really. And I think that's an important distinction to make. So I've made a three-way Venn diagram. I don't know if it's called something different when it's a three-way. I'm not going to make that joke. Anyway, so you have in this circle being lonely, in this circle being alone, and in this circle being independent. Obviously, you can have overlap with any of these or all of them at once. Now, if you are just lonely, you may desire for attention even if other people are around you. For B, being alone, you should have others around probably, but maybe you don't. And being independent, you can have others around, but still feeling fulfilled when they're not. Being independent is obviously going to be the most ideal, but being independent does not mean you shouldn't have others around. It's very important to have other people in your life, and it's very healthy. Having friends at work and outside of work can be very beneficial for your mental health. Let's see. So let's say someone is both lonely and alone. Right here I wrote down that it's probably an internal struggle, but there is a possible external solution. By having another person around, that can alleviate the feeling of being lonely. Now, in 2, being lonely and independent, you don't necessarily need others around, but you still have that feeling of being lonely. Generally, I think that means more so a need for self-fulfillment. Now I'm thinking of that stupid picture with like Mr. Bean, and they're all like trying to be motivational with it, like, Mr. Bean taught me you don't need the company of others, or some dog shit like that. I don't know. It's like an image trying to be deep even when it's incredibly shallow. Anyways, being alone and independent can simply mean that you are alone by circumstance, but you're doing just fine. A lot of people will usually bounce between 3 and 2, from what I see. Sometimes 1, but not as often. Now, when you are all 3 at once, it may or may not be resolved by companionship. These are obviously, pretty surface level descriptions for these 3 things, and then each of the overlaps. But that's what I have for this page. I know this may not necessarily be the most comedic or entertaining of videos, but I hope you find it informative, maybe helpful. We'll move on to the next page. Yeah, so for example, I put it out in very obvious terms. Those aren't all the possible types you can have. Those are just labels. Labels that you can throw on and do with it what you want, but obviously not all of them. Now, in this image, I have 2 dragons having a little chat with each other. On the inside, they are feeling a type of way. On the outside, they are expressing a basic sort of friendly conversation. But on the inside, this one right here, I have it as the type of dragon who will have a conversation with a friend in order to check off a box. Maybe they would feel guilty if they didn't talk to all of their friends. They don't want any of them to feel left out, or they don't want to feel like they themselves are not devoting at least a little bit of attention to every single one of them. Whereas this one may feel alone even in the presence of someone else. And these two, while they may express outwardly being fine, on the inside, they can be harboring ideologies, thoughts, as these right here. Now, neither of these, in my opinion, are all too healthy. You shouldn't necessarily feel like people around you are just obligations to fulfill. Nor should you necessarily feel alone when talking to someone. But sometimes these feelings just happen. They're not necessarily wrong to feel. It's kind of like an intrusive thought. You shouldn't outwardly express it ever, but it does happen naturally. And those are things we need to be on the lookout for, because they can be telling of ourselves and how we are as people, and how we are as reptiles. Anyways, moving on. This is kind of like a slideshow. On this page, I decided to draw a network of relationships, whether they be platonic, romantic, whatever the case is, doesn't truly matter in this discussion. Let's say we have the group over here. We'll just say that they're a rambunctious bunch, very tight-knit. Over here, you have someone who's a stickler for the rules. Over here, you have the couple that essentially act with one brain. Not saying that all couples do that, but some do, and it can be funny. But then you have this person right here. Maybe they're just very relaxed, laid back. This person right here, maybe they're just worried about the future or what they want to do with their lives. And then this person right here, who is very content on what they are doing, and they want to stay where they are. And then this guy in the middle. Now, each of these lines is a connection between each of these groups, each of these individuals as well. Now, a heart, pretty self-explanatory, but this is when you have a relationship where you like each other. Let's say this guy in the middle, he can like pretty much everyone around him. But that doesn't necessarily mean that those people he likes will like each other. And that can make things complicated, which is why relationships in general are a complex issue. Or, well, I don't want to say issue because that makes it sound like relationships are bad. Obviously, that's not the case. But you could have these two. They really enjoy each other's company. They like hanging out. But then these two, not so much. They might hate each other's guts even. And then you have this person who just can't stand this person either. But they do enjoy the company of this guy. And even though this guy enjoys company with all of the parties involved, that doesn't mean that they'll all like each other. And what this can lead to is infighting. Let's say that this person speaks well of this person, to this person. If this person is going to be communicating in a positive light about this person to someone who doesn't like them, then that could cause a strain on this positive relationship. And then this right here, sometimes you have someone who is not very fond of cliques or groups like this, but still fond of the person who still likes them. Now, obviously, this is a little bit of like a silly way to demonstrate this with just a picture, lines, circles, hearts, and crosses, and all that stuff, but it does illustrate that everyone you may know around you can have different relationships with each other. Some personalities do not mesh well with others, and that is fine, that's normal. The issue comes in with the strains on relationships, as I was talking about. Let's say one of them says something very harmful about someone you like or care about. Even though you were friends with both of them, hearing something like that can be hurtful. So you may want to silence them, block them, or in terms of the figurative approach, burning bridges with them. In this illustration, I'm showing a literal bridge burning by this guy because of what this guy said. Now, you can burn bridges, cut ties. There are drastic ways to end relationships and then mellow ways to end relationships. In that way, relationships are a lot like bridges with that metaphor. Here's the thing. Bridges do require maintenance or they fall apart. Not all the time. There are some exceptions, depending on how well the bridge was made to begin with. In this example right here, I have this guy right here. He's maintaining his side of the bridge, with a simple greeting and whatnot, but it doesn't matter how well kept up this side of the bridge is. If the other side has no maintenance, the bridge will fall apart regardless. And even if the bridge were to stay up, there's no way to meet halfway because there's no way for them to get across. Over here for the illustration, I just had silenced notifications. So that obviously doesn't mean that they're just ignoring him. But that was the clearest way for me to draw that. And this happens all too often. You will find someone, you really enjoy their company. You will have a lot of pleasant conversations with them, and you're happy to have made a new friend. That doesn't mean that they necessarily will see the relationship the same way. It may be a matter of give and take, or it may be a matter of, hey, it was nice talking to you, and then they move on with their life, and they don't come back to that bridge. And that happens sometimes, naturally. You may harbor resentment towards people who do this sort of thing, but it happens to pretty much everyone. You may start a conversation with someone and then you run out of things to talk about. You don't really have a whole lot you connect with. And then eventually, the bridge wears away. Now let's say you build a very strong, sturdy bridge. You could come to this type of bridge years later, and it would be still just working just as well as it was the day they made it. Now, a good bridge obviously has a much sturdier foundation. You have interest, respect, care, trust, love. And with bridges like this, um, as with healthy relationships, uh, actually, we'll just drop the bridge metaphor for now. But anyway, it can be a 50-50 give and take. It could be a 10-90. It could be a 40-60. It could be a 70-30. Because you can't necessarily give your all the time. Um, if you have a 10-10, where it's, you can only give 10% of your full effort and attention and all that, um, it could be that you just simply need a break, but that doesn't mean that the bridge goes away. Um, and you can always be in the background to support. But either way, this is what a healthy bridge looks like. I'm not an engineer, so my bridge picture is probably a little silly if you were to look at it from an engineer perspective, but oh well, you get the idea. Um, these relationships, though, are much harder to come by. They rely on a very good chemistry, as well as a genuine interest in someone else's success and their well being. And even when you may have interest in someone else's interest, having interest in someone else's success doesn't always happen. Now, if you were to say something out loud like, oh, I'm not interested in your success, that obviously sounds pretty toxic. But it's not necessarily as harsh as that. It can simply be a matter of not giving it a consideration, where you see someone as a friend, someone to talk to, um, but you don't necessarily know their goals and aspirations. So wishing for someone's success is a step further, and not everyone goes the extra mile with that. And that's okay, because that happens. That's how relationships work. Let's say you have nothing but those sort of surface level relationships, even if they're good ones. Um, you can end up feeling isolated by cutting ties with any of those relationships because you no longer have them. Really, what you need are those very strong, well built relationships in order to avoid this sort of issue of feeling isolated by cutting off surface level relationships. This is the clearest way I could have illustrated this, but going back to what I was talking about with that whole circle of relationships, um, let's say this guy over here says, you no longer like so and so, so I no longer like you. They end up cutting ties with you, and you cut ties with that person that they liked. Now, by circumstance, you end up isolated from both parties and are now alone. This can happen. Now, afterwards, you have a few options when you are in isolation like this. You can either see it as an opportunity for personal growth so that you no longer feel alone and you feel a sense of self-fulfillment, or you can harbor resentment towards both parties. Towards this party for ruining your relationship with someone you did still enjoy their company, or resentment towards a person who took your relationship so frivolously that they would cut off ties with you simply because you cut off ties with one of their friends, which shows that their relationship may have been stronger than yours, even though you thought it was stronger than it was. Now, that's no hate on any of these parties, really. relationships can die or be cut off for a multitude of reasons, which is why the personal growth route is much better. Let's say that while in this isolation, you think to yourself, well, maybe this person wasn't as bad as I was making them out to be. Maybe I just didn't understand their views, how they viewed the world, and maybe it's a matter of, while I do strongly disagree with them, I do not necessarily disagree with the decision for this person to enjoy this person's company. If they are able to overlook the flaws of this person that I was not able to, then perhaps that says more about their character than of mine. Um, there are multiple ways to go about relationships like this. There is the harmful way, which is resentment, and then the healthy way, personal growth. And then I just put an option C here because these aren't the two only options, of course. There are other unhealthy options and other healthy options. Like, for example, picking up a hobby or finding new friends based on something you connect with them. Friends are pretty neat, anyway. Yeah, I just have myself and Wolf right here. And while this may seem a little cold from Wolf, just know that good friends know how to haze and tease each other and still be good friends over it. So you can say something that's kind of an insult, you can be kind of mean with each other, but in the end, you still love each other's company and have care and respect for each other. And that is the healthiest form of friendship. Having nothing but good things to say about another person isn't necessarily always a good thing. Because then it becomes a matter of, well, is there any disagreement? Is there anything to make this relationship interesting? And that's why some relationships end up failing over time. There's nothing to connect with or anything to really disconnect and create a discussion over. It's important to disagree with your friends on certain things. It can be simple, silly little things. But if it's like fundamental principles and it's a moral issue, that doesn't mean you have to, maintain that relationship if it leads to any sort of toxicity. Anyway, the last thing I will end with is a little bit of a poem that I wrote. Life wasn't meant to be lived alone, but do not reside in an infested home. Meet a quarter, 5/8, and sometimes halfway, but make it a goal to love every day. Obviously, you're not loving every day of your life. There are some days themselves that are not entirely pleasant. That's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying here is simply making it a goal to love someone every day is a healthy way to go about life. You will get hurt from relationships. You will grow from relationships. And sometimes you may even revert from some relationships. But that doesn't mean that you should live your life alone. If you feel lonely, perhaps it's the relationships you currently have that need to be fostered. Because even if they're around, you may not have those deep conversations with them. Not deep as in like, wow, how philosophical. None of that silliness. Deep conversations as in invested conversations. And then, of course, living in an infested home, that is holding on to toxic relationships for fear of being alone. It's okay to drop friends, to cut off communication with um, anyone who may be toxic in your life. Because holding on to something like that can poison you. To take a Latin phrase, audito grano salis, originally that was a line in a recipe for a cure for poison. When translated, you have added a grain of salt. So that's where that expression comes from. With a grain of salt. You take things with a grain of salt because they could be poison. So, and then this line right here, of course, is meeting someone halfway. You may not always be able to, but putting in some sort of effort into a relationship can help maintain it better. If you are the only one putting effort into the relationship, then perhaps it is just that meager bridge. And maybe you need to look elsewhere for a stronger relationship with someone. Now, for anyone wondering, this is not a video throwing any shade at anyone in my personal life. I do have many friends and loved ones I care about. I only made this because I know it's something that a lot of people may struggle with. It is something, a conversation that has been had with many, many people. So I know it is a very relatable conversation, being alone versus feeling lonely. You can be surrounded by hundreds of friends and still feel alone. And generally, that's when you need to do some sort of reflection, whether on yourself or with those relationships you have, whether or not they are strong, whether or not you can come to them at any time. But yeah, that's all I have for this video. I know it was a bit drier than usual. I do appreciate your patience in sticking with me with this. I may not have a whole lot of free time, but I definitely try to make the most of the time that I do have. So, thank you for watching. I do appreciate your viewership. I appreciate having an audience for discussions like this. And even if I didn't, this video was fun to make. It was fun to do these sketches, and then also reflect myself on what it means to have a relationship with someone, whether that be companionship or something romantic. But anyways, I will see you in the next one. Walete, and ta-ta for now.